Well, g'day everybody. We've come now to the seventh and the final lecture on 1st Isaiah, those first 39 chapters. And today's session is on Isaiah 34 to 39. Within those chapters we have two major sections, chapters 34 and 35, which we call a sort of a diptych, which is, those two panels that you're meant to look at together of a painting, say, or two different paintings that somehow or other throw light on each other. There's the final destruction of Edom in chapter 34, and that's contrasted with the ultimate exaltation of Zion in chapter 35. And the second major section is chapters 36 to 39, which at first glance look as though they have simply been lifted holus bolus from the second book of Kings. But on closer examination, we can see that they're really preparing us in a remarkable way for 2nd Isaiah and 3rd Isaiah, the other sections of the book. Chapters 36 to 39 contain three different incidents which happened around the time of the Assyrian assault on Judea in 701 BC, under, of course, the great king of Assyria, Sennacherib. There's the intervention of Isaiah during the crisis itself, chapters 36 and 37. There's the healing of King Hezekiah, who's suffering from a life-threatening illness, in chapter 38. And then there's the prediction of the Babylonian exile following a delegation from Babylon coming to visit King Hezekiah a couple of years before 701 BC. That's the short chapter, the last chapter, 39. So I'd like to divide what we're doing today into four sections. The first will be Isaiah 34 and 35, and they function as a sort of a summary of Isaiah and his fundamental message. And then over those two chapters we see it's broadened a little bit. It's less tied to historical circumstances, and it's a little bit more future orientated with that eschatological perspective we've come to see as part of Isaiah. So we could say it's a bridge between all of our 1st Isaiah and what we're going to be reading in 2nd and 3rd Isaiah. The second thing I want to talk about is then Isaiah 36 and 37. And those two chapters belong very closely together, and they really contain different accounts of Isaiah's intervention in 701 BC, that Assyrian crisis, and it's woven into a single story. The third thing I'd like to look at is Isaiah 38, the story of Hezekiah's illness and healing. And we're going to see that functions in a way as a symbol of Jerusalem's mortal illness and its eventual recovery. And the fourth thing, the little chapter, Isaiah 39, where Hezekiah shows a delegation from Babylon his wealth and the riches of Jerusalem. And then Isaiah makes that prophecy, it's all going to end up in Babylon, in the exile. And of course this prepares us for the next chapter, Isaiah 40, which is the beginning of the great 2nd Isaiah. Right, let's do the first section then, Isaiah's 34 and 35. Edom and Zion, judgment, salvation. These two chapters, 34 and 35, need to be seen together. They're a diptych as mentioned before, so we need to see these two panels of the painting side by side. We see the judgment of the nations, symbolically presented to us as the definitive destruction of Edom, and we see the final salvation of Zion in wondrous eschatological terms. Blenkinsop points out that the very midpoint of the Masoretic text of Isaiah, that is, the Hebrew text, is chapter 33, verse 20. So some commentators say that really chapters 34 and 35 belong to 2nd Isaiah, because we see some language that's very common with 2nd Isaiah. A highway for the redeemed, a vision of God's glory, joyful, exultant singing, opening the eyes of the blind. But Childs makes the observation that these two chapters show also a dependence on earlier Isaiah. In particular, chapter 15, with its description of the utter forsakenness of the land under judgment, where only horrible creatures like hyenas and jackals live, and where the destruction is pictured in the same terms as the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Edom is here. Edom is the bad nation. And it's replaced Assyria and Babylon as personified evil. And this happens after the exile, as the memory of Assyria and Babylon themselves fade. The Edomites occupied large areas of the Negev desert, and they profited from the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem. And even though they were conquered by the Nabateans in the 400s BC, their bad name, that symbolic name, continued in Jewish history. Chapter 34 then, first off, about Edom, is a bloodthirsty, frightening sort of a read. It's the sort of passage that Richard Dawkins would have a field day with. The sword of Yahweh is gorged with blood. It's glutted with fat. For Yahweh has a great slaughter in the land of Edom, but instead of wild oxen, nations fall. In place of bulls, a race of mighty men. It's apocalyptic. It hammers home God's ultimate judgment of evil. It uses language from the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah from the book of Genesis, and it does reflect really the terror and the horror of the slaughter of invading armies in that day, and especially the barbarism of the Assyrians. Now, the most extended symbol for the desolation that follows is of a land inhabited by these repulsive creatures. So thorns will grow in the palaces there, thistles and nettles in the fortresses. It will be a lair for jackals. Wild cats and hyenas will meet there, and so on and so on. Moving then to the other side of the diptych, chapter 35, we've got a very opposite scenario. God's avenging justice will bring salvation to the land, to Judea, and to all its peoples. And this magnificent passage, it's a glorious poem, is used 3 times in our liturgy. On Sunday, in Advent of year A, I forget which Sunday, but it's then. On the 27th Sunday of year B in ordinary time, and again on Monday, week 2 of Advent. So we come across it reasonably frequently, considering. Let the wilderness and dry land exult. Let the wasteland rejoice and bloom. Let it bring forth flowers like the jonquil. Let it rejoice and sing for joy. So there's atmosphere of great joy and great exaltation. Look, your God is coming. Vengeance is coming. The retribution of God is coming to save you. It's interesting, isn't it? God is coming to avenge. But he avenges the poor. He'll save the poor. That's the true meaning of judgment. When God comes to judge, he destroys the evil things and saves the good, the poor. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, the ears of the deaf unsealed. For water gushes in the deserts and streams in the wasteland. The lairs where the jackals used to live become thickets of reed and papyrus. An extraordinary reversal. Really, just you compare the two and you can see how things have just dramatically changed and been improved by God. And through it will run a highway undefiled, which shall be called the Sacred Way. The redeemed will walk there, for there Yahweh has ransomed those that return. Very beautiful. We are now in the heart of the glorious message of 2nd Isaiah. Make a straight highway for our God across the desert. Let every valley be filled in, every mountain and hill laid low. Speak to the heart of Jerusalem that her time of service, of suffering, is ended. And so, we're ready to move into chapter 40, into 2nd Isaiah. But again, before that, we've got these chapters 36 to 39. So the second thing I'd like to look at is chapters 36 and 37, which need to be seen together. But just a general intro for a moment on 36 to 39. If we were living 100 years ago, we would have been told that chapters 36 to 39 were simply lifted from the 2nd book of Kings. That's an historical book, and it was done because, well, they wanted any material from the book of Kings about Isaiah to be a sort of an appendix to Isaiah, 1st Isaiah. But today we've come to realize that these chapters have been modified. They're not exactly the same as they appear, although many of the verses are word for word. There's one significant omission. It's only 5 verses, not 5, 3 verses, but they're very significant. 2 Kings 18, verses 14 to 16. They sometimes call that version A. And that's an account of Hezekiah's humiliating surrender to Sennacherib with his payment of tribute. Now that's a significant omission. And then there's a significant addition. The Psalm of Hezekiah in chapter 38. We should add too that despite a lot of research in the 1990s, we would still hold today that Isaiah is using the book of Kings, that they're prior. They were written first. However, editors have fashioned both the account in the book of Kings and the account in the prophet Isaiah slightly differently for their own different theological purposes. If we hone in a little bit now on those chapters 36 and 37, which has its parallels in the 2nd book of Kings, chapters 18 and 19, we can see that within those 2 chapters in Isaiah, as in Kings, there are 2 different strands that have been put together. Version A, the brief factual account of 2 Kings, isn't found in Isaiah, and some say it's because it pictures King Hezekiah as defeated. It is accurate historically because we know from Assyrian sources, the Assyrian royal annals, that Sennacherib's western campaign ended in 701 with Hezekiah's submission and the reduction of Judah to a rump state.